Remember the Nintendo Wii? Yeah, that thing let you buy NES, Super Nintendo, and 64 games all on day one via the Virtual Console. Then the Wii U followed on the same path, while also sweetening the pot a little bit by tossing Game Boy Advance, DS, and even Wii titles into the mix. However, once it came to the Switch, it friggin' took Nintendo years just to add NES and Super Nintendo games, with updates very few and far between, despite the high demand for retro content. Which obviously begs the question of just why the above-average-sized end's being so damn weird about all this, and if you ask my fat ass, I think I might know what the frig they're thinking. So sit back in your favorite Steiner recliner and allow me, YouTube's tallest man, Cameron all one word, to tell you what made Nintendo so reluctant to put legacy content on the Switch. Okay, so short story even shorter, I think Nintendo's hoarding some of their retro games to make people want them even more so that whenever they finally do manage to put some of them out on a rainy day, they make a much bigger impact. The first time Nintendo did this was when they didn't have a big game ready for 2020 due to that whole global pandemic thingy that was going on, so they figured it was time to reach into their well of retro games to make sure their stocks didn't plummet. And well, even though it was just 3 old games thrown onto a cartridge after like 24 minutes worth of work, the thing ended up selling over 8 million physical copies and God knows how many digital ones. For whatever it's worth, that's a hell of a lot more than most of the Switch's original titles that had way more time and effort put into them. And as much as I hate to admit it, I don't think these 3 games would have made nearly as big of an impact had they just been on the Switch digitally from day one, so it looks like Nintendo's strategy of only releasing legacy content once every blue moon's paying off, as frustrating as that may be. I hate to defend Nintendo whenever they do things that suck, but when their stocks drop $1 billion overnight just because a game like Animal Crossing gets delayed by 3 friggin' months, I can't fully condemn them for wanting to make sure they have big games ready for rainy days like whenever there's a global pandemic, or when Breath of the Wild sequel needs a little more time. I mean, 3D All-Stars sold really well and kept the stonks afloat, so it is what it is, I guess. Obviously, it'd be way better if they always just had their AAA games ready to go, but what can you do? At least they don't rush their games, I guess. I made a video a while back about why Nintendo refuses to put 64 GameCube and Wii games on the Switch that people like to try and roast me for in the comments because 3D All-Stars came out like 2 weeks later. However, in that video, I actually said that the compilation is probably going to happen, and the fact that they just yanked the game away from us after 6 months proves every point I was trying to make in that video and the ones I'm trying to make now. And that point is that Nintendo just does not want to release any games from that era unless they feel like they absolutely have to. Personally, I kinda prefer retro games being released on cartridges, so that aspect is pretty cool, aside from Fire Emblem, which I guess would have been a little excessive for such a small game, even though they actually did release a physical without a cartridge anyway. But I'm honestly not too sure if the whole limited thing really makes Nintendo more money in the long run, though. I mean, it definitely makes them assloads of money in the short term, especially right before the end of their fiscal quarter, and I'm sure scalpers inflated the numbers a good bit, too. Plus, the sense of urgency probably did get a lot more people to buy it right away who might have otherwise told themselves that they'd get it later, only to eventually forget about it. But I don't know, I still feel like Super Mario 3D All-Stars would have constantly sold well until the Switch was discontinued, but maybe it would have taken away from the sales of Odyssey or something like that, I don't know. I mean, I love Odyssey, don't get me wrong, but I feel like if I were a semi-casual gamer and had to pick one of the two, I'd probably choose the 3-pack. I guess you could argue that the Virtual Console sales never hurt the sales of original Wii games, sure, but according to everything I could find, the Virtual Console didn't really make all that much money either. In fact, if the researching firm known as Fade's to be believed, then the physicals for Super Mario 3D All-Stars alone made way more than the combined sales of every Virtual Console game that we had to offer as of 2010. And since the Wii U is kind of a dick about letting you transfer games over that you might have bought in the last generation, and I'd imagine that the sales were considerably worse on that console, because if they weren't, then I can't imagine why Nintendo wouldn't have kept doing it for the Switch. Personally, I really try not to resort to emulation, but if Nintendo's not gonna let me keep every game I buy in my account so I can play them on every Nintendo console from this point forward, then I'm just not even gonna bother unless there's a cool physical involved. I guess the Switch's online service is kind of a step in the right direction, but honestly, I'm not a big fan of knowing that my game's gonna be taken away from me at any moment. And since the only reason people are subscribing to the service in the first place is to play Switch games online, it's really not like Nintendo's making money off of the games themselves, which I'd imagine is why there's still so many games and consoles that are missing on the service. So after the success of Mario, along with Skyward Sword that I'm positive is going to sell out the ass, it looks like Nintendo's going to keep on releasing their older games the same way going forward. And if that's true, then I'm guessing that it's only going to be once every blue moon or so. Or, you know, I guess it is possible that 64 games might be exclusive to an upgraded Switch model or something like that. I mean, the new 3DS did it with Super Nintendo games, so anything's possible, I suppose. Obviously, it'd be nice if Nintendo just had every game they've ever made available digitally, with every purchase being tied to your Nintendo account forever and ever until the end of time, but the harsh reality is that not giving people what they want only makes them want it that much more, so it seems impossible that Nintendo won't keep depriving thirsty retro fans so that they have guaranteed hits on standby for rainy days. While I prefer a virtual console that lets you keep your game games forever though, I will say that it is at least nice for older games to get physical so we can keep and resell. Plus, I kinda dig minor upgrades like HD remasterings and standard controller support for games like Skyward Sword. If I were to suddenly become the president of Nintendo though, and let's be honest, I really should be, then I'd do a lot of things differently to make these retro re-releases way better. But seeing as how Horde and Legacy content makes Nintendo assloads more money, then I don't think we're gonna get too many more retro games on the Switch unless they have a rainy day. At least not until we start refusing to buy these games anyway, but I mean, come on. We all know that most of us are gonna eat these up, especially if they're only available for a limited time, as lame as that may be. But anyway, that's all for today, though. If you liked this video, then you should check out my tier list for the core Super Mario Bros. Franchise. You'll excuse me, though. I gotta go frame my stepdad for a crime so I could stay up late watching his Full House DVDs. Later.
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty. Thank you for your support.